Hello, my name's Jonathan Dunn and this is the 12th in a series of videos called Theological English. In the previous video, we looked at word connections made by the addition of letters from A to H in the alphabet. And in this video, I'd like to look at the rest of the alphabet from I onwards. We saw in the previous video how it's necessary to continue applying the rules we've already looked at, changing the vowels and the consonants according to phonetics where they are pronounced in the mouth. Changing the letters according to their position in the alphabet and according to their appearance, their shape. We might turn a letter upside down or back to front. It's interesting that so far we've looked at these word connections, and you will see that the most commonly added letters here are D, E, and H, in particular H. If I show you the list of words that we're going to look at now, you will see that also common are S and T. So why these 5 letters, D, E, H, S and T are most commonly added? Well, I think there's a very good reason for this. The most commonly added letter in my experience is H, and H is simply the addition of a little more breath. H represents breath, so it's a very easy letter to add in order to make a word connection. Similarly, E is very commonly added together with H, and the 2 letters together spell he, which I think is interesting. E is a letter that we find very commonly in English, in particular at the ends of words. It often serves to lengthen the preceding syllable, man, main, with an E on the end. So I think E is very common in the English language, in particular at the end of words. The third most commonly added letter is S. And again, I think there's a very good reason for this. You will see that S with H and E spells she. S is used in English to make the plural, book, books, and it's also used to make the third person singular of the present simple. I share, he shares. I look, she looks. So again, we shouldn't be surprised to see that S is very commonly added when making word connections. And the other 2 letters, well, they are a phonetic pair, D, T, D, T. And these are the 2 ways we pronounce the past simple in English, the letters ED. For example, I share, I shared. I look, I looked. So D, T are also very commonly added to make word connections, representing as they do the pronunciation of the past tense, the letters ed that we add on to verbs to make the past tense. Well, let us start with the addition of the letter I. And I have the verb be. Now, if I turn the letter B of the verb be back to front and insert the I in the middle, I will get die. Die. So die is very closely linked to be, but with the addition of I, the letter I, which is how we talk about the self in English. Interestingly enough, another word that contains be is live. Live also contains be. If you remember in the video on phonetics, I mentioned an 8th phonetic pair, even though they're actually 3 letters, B, V, W. Well, if we apply B, V, we will see that the last 2 letters of live contain B. But here, instead of the addition of one I, we have the addition of 2 I's. Lowercase L is very similar to uppercase I, and here is the second I. So whereas die with B gives 1 I, live with B seems to give 2 I's. And I find this difference rather interesting. I have 2 possible explanations for this. The first is that in this life, we are a combination of body and soul. Whereas when we die, we leave our body behind until the universal resurrection, when we will be reunited with our body and become only our soul. This could explain why there are 2 I's in live and only 1 I in die. Another reason, I think, could be this idea that the self can be false. It can turn us into a slave. We looked at these word connections. It can take us down roads that may appear attractive momentarily, but are not for our good. And we saw how if we take the ego, the I, out of live and count down to O, 1 to 0, I to O, we get love. And that could explain why in live there are 2 I's, and when we take out the false I, the one that responds to our selfish demands, we get love, and we are left only with the 1 I, the true self, who we are meant to be. But this is a process that takes time. And in fact, die and live, which are in a sense the 2 extremities of time in our experience of it, are both closely connected to the word time. You will see that die, if I use the phonetic pair DT, is in time with the addition of the letter M. So I've got the phonetic pair DT and the vowels are the same with the addition of the letter M. And live is also connected with time. If I take steps in the alphabet from L to M, from T to V, omitting the vowel U. The vowels here, I and E, are the same. So die and live are both closely connected with time. And this is our understanding of human life from an earthly point of view, that our existence is closely linked to the time we spend on earth. Die has some other very interesting connections. Hide, if we add the letter H, we get hide. Shed, if we add the letter S and take a step in the alphabet, H, I. And tide, if we add the letter T. These are all connected with die. Hide, shed, and tide. Hide, you see, has D-I-E with the addition of the letter H. Shed has D-I-E. I've taken a step in the alphabet, H-I, with the addition of the letter S. And tide has D-I-E with the addition of the letter T. Well, animals, when they are about to die, very often hide. They disappear from view. When we die, as I mentioned earlier in connection with the difference between die and live, one eye and two eyes, we shed our shell, our body. We leave it behind in order to be reunited with it at the universal resurrection. And tide is very similar to the breath that enters and leaves our body when we are born and when we die. So I think these three words are very closely connected to die for a very good reason. Let us move on to seed. We already saw the connection between seed and dies if we read the word in reverse and change the two front vowels, E and I. And a seed must die in the ground in order to grow roots, a shoot, and eventually to bear fruit. And we saw in the previous video the connection between see with our eyes and seed, and hear with our ear and heart. How when our spiritual eyes are opened through faith, a seed is planted in our heart, and there it grows. Well, I think there's another connection here, but I need to rotate the D by 180 degrees and make it P. If I then add L, I get the word sleep. By rotating the D by 180 degrees and adding the letter L from seed, I get sleep. And that is exactly what a seed does. It remains dormant. In fact, there are seed banks where seeds are being kept in that very state in case they're needed in the future. A seed can sleep for a very long time before resurrecting, before coming to life in the ground and growing roots and a shoot and bearing fruit. And this is an obvious metaphor for our own death when our body is placed in the ground and then rises again at the general resurrection. We're very much in that sense like a seed that must sleep for a period of time. And I wanted to look at the connections with the word sow, because this is what we do with a seed. We sow it in the ground. Sow is very closely connected to word. And you will remember the parable of the sower, where the seed being sown is the word of God. And I think we can see this very closely in the connection between sow and word. We take a step in the alphabet, R, S, and we read the word in reverse, sow, with the addition of the letter D. So sow is very much in word, referring to the word of God, which is like a seed that is planted in our heart, but can remain dormant for a time. And sow is very similar to another word. In fact, it forms the first three letters of that word, soul. All I have to do is change the U in soul into its semivowel equivalent, W. So sow is also in soul, just as the seed is planted in our heart. So it is sown in our soul. And when our spiritual eyes are opened, that seed in our heart, sown in our soul, can come to life and bear fruit. Let us look now at connections made by the addition of the letter S. And the first example I would like to give is blood. Now, you may think this is quite a difficult connection to make. Blood is connected with spirit. Blood, spirit. Now, if you remember the phonetic pairs that we looked at in a previous video, which are essential to an understanding of the spiritual content of language, you have to know the 7 phonetic pairs, but they're not too difficult according to where the consonants are pronounced in the mouth. You will see that B is connected with P, L is connected with R, and D is connected with T, because these are phonetic pairs. B, P, L, R, D, T. And the only other change I have to make is to turn the 2 O's into I's, and I have spirit. Blood, I think, is intimately connected with spirit. Now, I think the main reason for this is the idea of the church fathers, that you must give blood in order to receive spirit. In order to grow spiritually, you have to sweat blood and tears. It involves work. And this is why the reverse of work, if we apply the phonetic pair GK, is grow. It does involve our cooperation as well as God's grace. So I think the main reason that blood and spirit are connected is that we have to make an effort, give blood, in order to grow spiritually, receive spirit. But there is also a quotation from the book of Genesis, chapter 9, verse 4, when God addresses Noah and his sons after the flood. And he says that they can eat anything they like, only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. So blood is very closely connected with life, which is spirit. So I think from the time of the Old Testament, there is this close connection between blood and spirit, but I connect it most closely to the desert fathers and the idea of giving blood in order to receive spirit. This view is confirmed by Gregory of Nyssa in his Life of Moses and also in the Macarian homilies. And then we have word. Now, if I add S to word, to the beginning of word, I get sword. And I think words, if they are meant to harm, to inflict harm, can almost feel physical and act like a sword that wounds us. And I think this connection is very clear here between word and sword. A word, when it comes out of the mouth, seems to be immaterial, to have no matter, but its effect can be like that of a sword, which is very material, something that we hold. Word, sword. But word is also the word of God. And if you look at the icons of saints, very often the saint is depicted as a soldier holding a sword, which is the word of God, and the saint wields that sword, the word of God. And you will see this connection between word and a weapon also in speak, because speak ends with the letter K. If I take a step in the alphabet, K, L, and then apply the phonetic pair L, R, I get spear. So, word, sword, speak, spear. And saints can often also be depicted with a spear. And what's the other weapon often used in antiquity? Well, a bow and arrow. And these also are closely connected with word, bow, arrow, do you see? If I remove the R from word and turn the D back to front, as we did with B and die, I've got bow. And arrow, well, three of the letters are the same, aren't they? R-O-W, R-O-W. It's just that arrow has an A on the front and word has a D at the end. So word seems to be linked very closely with weapons, sword, bow and arrow. Speak is linked with spear. And I think this also harks back to the creation of the world in the book of Genesis. I believe that God spoke the world into being, and there also his word became physical creatures, a physical environment. So that connection between the word, which appears to be not physical, to be immaterial, and the physical world, I think was there in the beginning when God created the world by speaking through the word. The word became flesh. We read that also at the beginning of the Gospel of John. So this connection between blood and spirit, word and flesh, the physical, I think is very clear here in these connections with the addition of the letter S. Let us move on to the letter T. If we add the letter T to peace, we get accept. Peace, accept. You will see that I've got A. I repeat the C. So C, C, and then only one E, P and T. So peace is very much in accept. And it is true that if we don't accept things, obviously we try to fight injustice and we try to grow spiritually, to improve ourselves, to give of ourselves, but we can't do everything. We rely on God's help, and there are certain things that we must accept as they are. And when we accept them, then I think we find peace. This is why there is a connection between peace and accept. Not accept injustice, not accept what is wrong with ourselves, what we do not like about ourselves. We try to change things for the better, but there is a limit to what we can achieve on our own. And the opposite of accept is refuse. Now, if you refuse, then I think the connection here is suffer. Refuse and suffer have exactly the same letters, except that in refuse we have two E's, in suffer we have two F's, but the letters are the same. This is a very similar connection to resume and summer that we saw in the video on using the same letters in a different order. So accept leads to peace, but refuse leads to suffer. And I think these connections go very well together. This often happens. You often find that one connection is confirmed by another. And if we look at semen and add the letter T, we get cement. Semen, cement. Cement is spelt with a C, but the C is pronounced S. So it's a very easy connection to make. Well, I understand that for the egg of a woman to remain in the womb, it must be penetrated by a sperm. And when the sperm penetrates the outer lining of the egg, then the egg sticks to the wall of the womb. So in that sense, semen acts like cement, sticking the egg to the wall of the womb so that a fetus can develop. Their etymologies are completely different. Semen is from the Latin serere, to sow. Cement is from the Latin caementum, quarry stone, caedere, to hew, to cut. But their meaning is close, and this is what has brought about the connection between them. Idle. If we add the letter V to idle, we get a word that we've seen rather a lot of, devil. Do you see how devil contains idle with the addition of the letter V? Idle. Okay? Now, the devil makes work for idle hands, and I think that connection can be seen here very closely. What is considered popular knowledge, the devil makes work for idle hands, is actually confirmed by language. If we don't have anything to occupy our time, if we're left feeling a little listless, we can turn our attention to things that we shouldn't really turn our attention to, and it can become a form of temptation. And I think this is clear here. The devil makes work for idle hands. Devil contains idle. And the last connection I wanted to look at today involves the addition of the letter W. If I add W to snare, which is a trap, I get answer. Answer, with the addition of the letter W, contains snare. Do you see? S-N-A-R-E, with the addition of the letter W. And I think always seeking an answer can be a kind of trap. We want to find an answer so that we can draw a line and shut the book and sit down and rest and take our mind off things? Well, I think an answer in the end always leads to a new question. Question contains quest, doesn't it? It is ongoing. Spiritual growth is ongoing. So of course we need times to rest. There has to be a balance, but we mustn't place too much emphasis on answer, because actually an answer is only a pause before we take the next step. So an over-reliance on getting an answer and satisfying our minds can be dangerous. And I think that's why answer contains snare. Another word that contains snare is reason. Also contains the word snare, except that this time we add the letter O. Do you see? S-N-A-R-E with the addition of the letter O. Here we added the letter W. But remember that the letter W is the Greek omega. So it's clearly connected with O. And reason also can be a snare if we rely too much on our reason. We have to use our reason to live in this world, but we also have to leave space for faith in order to grow spiritually. I don't think reason opens our spiritual eyes. I think it's faith that does that. And when you believe, then you receive. A word connection that we saw in a previous video about the alphabet. And this is confirmed by the connection between reason and treason, if I add the letter T. I think there has to be a balance between reason and faith, because I think reason will only take us so far. Here we have reason with the addition of the letter T. So reason is closely connected with snare and treason. We need a balance between reason and faith. This brings to an end the videos looking at how to make word connections in the English language. We've looked at using the same letters in the same order. We've looked at using the same letters in a different order, rearranging the letters. We've looked at changing the vowels and the consonants according to phonetics, where they are pronounced in the mouth. We've looked at changing letters according to their position in the alphabet and according to their physical appearance. And now we've looked at connections made by the addition of letters, where one word is longer than the other, where one word has more letters than the other. That is how word connections are made in the English language. That is how we will access the spiritual content of language. We think of language always as conveying a message, but we don't think of language as being a message in itself. And I think this is an important step that we need to make, to view language not only as a vehicle of meaning, but as containing meaning. And I would like to finish this course on theological English with 4 more short videos which will look at paradox. I find paradox to be an indicator of truth. Also believe, the importance of believe in the Christian message. Then I would like to look at proof in language for Christ as the Son of God and Mary as his mother. And I would like to end by looking at the progression I talked about in the first 2 videos, A, I, O, and how this can be found, this progression, not only between words, but also inside words. So I hope you will join me.